In this video, we're going to take a look at an orange ink by Robert Oster Peach. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. Also down in the description is a link to the orange ink playlist, so if you wanted to check out more, you can find that there. I'm an ink guy. Let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread. We do get shading in the stub. We get shading in the extra fine and in the medium. Actually, the shading's very nice. The extra fine and the medium show at the same tone, both of them a little bit lighter than the stub. The extra fine took 5 seconds to dry while the medium took 8. Scrubby for both show good color variation, and it's definitely there in the writing, but the smear test says you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Cross Bailey with a medium nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread. We have some shading and some haloing that's occurring in the stub. We get some shading a little bit in the extra fine and even a little bit in the medium. The extra fine and the medium are much lighter than they're showing on camera, but they're also quite a bit lighter than the stub. The extra fine took 8 seconds to dry while the medium took 11. Scrubby for both are showing some color variation, and we are getting it in the writing, and the smear test you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And what we really see is this is an orange leaning yellow, but it is really one color. I don't see anything showing this to be more than one dye. The one on the right that's allowed to dry for 10 minutes, they look exactly the same, and both of them are fleeing from the water, really showing that we're not going to have any resistance here. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread. We get shading in the stub. We get shading in the extra fine. We get shading in the medium. It shades very nicely. The extra fine and the medium are the same tone, both a little bit lighter than the stub. Extra fine took 4 seconds to dry while the medium took 7. Scrubby for both do show some good color variation, definitely in the writing. And the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, it actually handles itself much better than I was expecting. It even looks a little bit darker on there, but there is some blowout in that lowercase h. Now, I would in general not go back to highlight orange in my notes. I think you might be able to get away with it, but I wouldn't do it here. Water is reactivating and lifting a lot of it, but we do not see the white of the paper coming through here, which I was very surprised with. Pen flush, we do start to see some of the white of the paper coming through at the very bottom of where that dot was. It only took water to get this out of my pen, no surprise from a Robert Oster ink. And the 1/3 bleach solution that you're not going to need completely destroys it. The next writing sample is done on Moji paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feather, no spread, no shading for this stub. Only a couple spots. I was about to say no, but we do get some spots of shading for the extra fine. We see the shading easiest in the medium. The extra fine's the lightest tone on the page. The stub is a little bit light or a little bit darker than the extra fine, and the medium frequently shows darker than the stub. Now the extra fine took 4 seconds to dry while the medium took 6. Scrubby for both do show some color variation. It shows much better in the extra fine scrubby, but it shows better in the medium writing. And the smear test, you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster's Peach has a viscosity of 1.94, making this a wet ink. The next writing sample is done on Word notebooks. Now we get a few spots where it has come in quite deep, especially here in the medium. Not so bad with the extra fine. This is not paper made for fountain pens, so I think this performance is not too bad on the back, because you probably could use the back of the page. Now we get a little tiny feathers going on in the medium. We have no feathers going on in the extra fine. Both of them experience some spread. Again, a paper not made for fountain pens, so not the end of the world. I do think it would work here. The extra fine is a little bit lighter than the stub. When it comes to shading, we actually are getting a tiny bit of shading that is showing up in both the medium and the extra fine. A bit surprising there. The extra fine took 1 second to dry. Its scrubby shows color variation. There are spots that are darker. And the smear test, you can't smear it, so it makes it a great ink for a pocket notebook. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Robert Oster's Peach has an average dry time of 7 seconds, which is really fast. The last writing sample is done on 28-pound copy paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. We have no feathering. We have no spread. We do have some shading that shows itself in the medium. We have some shading that shows itself in the extra fine. The extra fine is lighter than the medium. It only took a second to dry. The scrubby shows color variation that we are getting on this paper. It's not common on this kind of paper that we get to see the shading. And the smear test, you can't smear it, so don't worry about it. Instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster's Peach, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I went with a nice blue by Sailor, Sky High, because it's a gentle blue. Now, if you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Robert Oster's Peach? This is darker on camera than it is in person. In person, it's difficult to read. It does darken a little as it dries, and it does shade well. I just see this as being a more difficult ink to actually use. So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? Because it has the ability to be a little too light, we need to put some more ink down, and even with more ink, we still get shading. I would go with a wet medium nib to really make sure it's dark enough to comfortably read and still have some of that shading. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Sailor Kobe number 27.